So here I am sitting in my car, just pausing for a minute. And it's the day after the election, after the part where we voted, not where they decide, because they still haven't decided. And a couple of few thoughts. Number one, as I drive over this mountain pass looking for more stuff for business stuff, it very clearly appears that life has gone on. It's kind of a cloudy day at the moment here in the mountains with a few sprinkles, and that kind of feels a little bit like the country at the moment. But I think at the moment I'm feeling like there were some major positives out of what we know so far. A couple of them huge surprises. So I thought there was a pretty reasonable chance that the Republicans would lose the Senate. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen. I think there's almost no chance that's going to happen now. And nobody thought, nobody thought that the Republicans would pick up the House, but everyone thought that the Democrat majority in the House would get stronger, and it's actually getting weaker. They're going to lose seats. That's interesting. And it's not going to flip, which means, interestingly, it really looked like all of Congress was going to be in the Democrats' hands, which meant if Biden ends up winning the presidency, that to me, from a liberty standpoint, is the worst thing that could have happened. With the push for socialism in America today, with the strength of the AOCs of the country and so forth, the worst thing that could have happened would have been a weak Democrat president like Biden being pushed to the left, with both a House and a Senate willing to go along and do crazy stuff. As I just heard on the radio, then talking to, I think it was a Fox News report, and talking about analysis because right now the Dow Jones is looking good for the day, and why would the Dow Jones be looking good for the day with things not being decided? Well, because the two things the stock market seems to like best are strong business conservatives in power, like Trump, or split government, gridlock. It really likes that because it means whoever's in charge, especially if the people in charge are not people that you want, then they can't get anything done, because the Senate's going to be there to stop them from being able to get anything significant changed. So taxes are very unlikely to go up. We're not going to have things like the destruction of the Electoral College or anything like that, because split government can't pull off things like that. And it's looking like we're going to have a whole lot of status quo. And I really like gridlock. I believe the best thing for the individual liberty of all of us is the federal government being able to accomplish as little as possible. Their job is supposed to be narrow. So when they're in a situation where they can't do very much, that's great for us. And that's clearly going to happen. So what's going to happen with the presidential election? I don't know. I would say I went to bed last night it looking reasonably positive for Trump, and now it's looking reasonably positive for Biden here middle of the day on the day after. What does that mean? I don't know. It means that this really could go on for a long time. I would say the thing that I was most hopeful of from a standpoint of looking at how the results were coming out last night was I was really hoping this was not going to come down to Pennsylvania, which is absolute chaos of the rules trying to have been changed. And so they're between rules and between rulings where the court said, no, just go back and act like we might rule eventually. And so these elections, one of the statements I saw in a headline was, this is not how we should pull off an election in 2020. And I agree. I think with all the technology and so forth that elections seem to take longer and longer to decide who the winner is kind of pathetic. I'm blown away that as the last time I looked, Alaska isn't decided. So that means that the situation is such where the counting is not very fast in Alaska, and none of the news agencies sent anybody to Alaska, and so Alaska is sitting there undecided, even though it's a staunchly conservative voting population. Even with a huge margin for Trump, they have no idea what's going on, so they can't call it. The other most interesting one is I've seen a couple of reports and watched myself seeing something happen in Arizona, which has been really interesting because Arizona, of course, people know, was Fox called it last night, and Trump was immediately upset that Fox called it and said that it was too early and everything. Well, the vote count got to 95% of votes counted, and then it dropped to 83 or 84% votes counted. And it happened because there were hundreds of thousands of votes, of ballots found. That's kind of absurd. In this stage of the game, that's really absurd. There's another one out there right now that's being talked about, was that there's someplace, I can't remember where it was, because this is really my attitude about it. I'm not following every last little thing. But someplace out there was over 100,000 early voting ballots found, and 100% of those ballots were Biden ballots. 100,000, and it's 100,000 to zero. That doesn't pass the smell test any place in the country. I mean, yes, there are places in the country, there are counties that vote north of 90% one way or the other, but none of them vote 100% one way or the other. That's the kind of voting you get in North Korea or Cuba, places like that. Venezuela. It's absurd. It's impossible that that's the case. So it'll be interesting to see how those things play out. Playing it out in the courts this is not the best way for it. But the nice thing is that in general, for those of us who care about liberty and care about what is the world going to be like 6 months from now, the decision, what happened with the Senate, what happened with governorships across the country, what happened with the House of Representatives, means whatever happens with the presidential election is less critical than it was going in last night. What would I have said if the Democrats won it all? Well, I think there would have been some positives to that too. Democrats win it all. The one thing you get is, I have said all along that the reason that loving liberty puts us on the conservative side is because we believe in the individual, and we believe in the individual's power to get ahead, and that not everybody's going to try as hard and so forth. You cannot do the socialist or communist thing and have equal outcomes. You cannot rig the outcome. To do that, you have to crush the people who move ahead, because the people who fall behind refuse to do what it takes to get ahead. And I think the best thing for long-term future is people seeing what is happening in Democrat cities. And I think when liberals speak, they are the best example for us. I was on Reddit last night and talking to some people, and people were saying outlandish things because they thought the world was ending because of course, they all thought that Trump was going to win last night. And any place, Reddit is a very liberal place. Every place I entered the conversation, I was immediately called stupid and a moron and uneducated and those sorts of things. And I pointed out that is the best argument for us that I could make. I want people to see that. I want people to see that is their argument for everything. That I, for God's sakes, don't think the liberals are stupid. I don't think they're morons. I think they're misguided. I think that they have a logic fallacy in the way they look at things. I think some of them are outlandishly devious. I think that I can prove that. And I've mentioned it before, read Rules for Radicals, and you will see exactly the Democrat Party of today. You will see how they got to where they are, and you can see that they have devious, disgusting, methodologies and ideas as to why they're doing what they're doing. But I don't think the average Democrat in America is like that. I think they're reasonably intelligent people. I just think they're wrong. And wrong doesn't make you stupid. Okay? But they've decided that they don't need to argue with us. They just call us stupid and morons and horrible names and racist and homophobe and all those sorts of things. And I believe last night showed that that has no effect. Trump, another conclusion is, without a doubt, Trump got more votes this time than he got last time. From an individual liberty standpoint, that is a brilliant thing, because what it says is the media and the Hollywood elites and all of our movies being liberal and Facebook and Twitter and all of the pressure being put on is not having the effect that they want. You would think, from an outside view, from a historical view, you would think 4 years of endlessly negative stories about Trump, 4 years of influential people in America almost universally saying how horrible he is, the middle of a pandemic with hundreds of thousands of people dead, huge downturn in the economy because of having to deal with that pandemic, those things should have added up to a monumentally huge win for Biden. And even the hatred drummed up against Trump led to more people voting for him. And amazingly, probably the most amazing thing for conservatives are the huge number of minority votes for Trump. I mean, the numbers are going to be astronomical. The numbers are going to have come up. And what do I mean by astronomical? I don't mean 90% voted for him. That's not, that would be a different kind of astronomical. No, record numbers no Republican has ever drawn in American history by a lot. Those are amazing things. And I think those portend very good things for the future of liberty. But the number one thing that shows good for liberty is that we didn't listen. We didn't fall in line with what the controllers of the media world told us to do. We did the opposite of that. We decided we can think for ourselves in huge numbers. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's awesome. Am I feeling... No, I'm not feeling like Trump's going to win. That's not my feeling at the moment. I was feeling like that as I went to bed last night. So I got one night of sleep thinking that might be the case. But either way, I also went to bed thinking there was still a reasonably good chance we were going to lose the Senate and the House was going to move probably 12 more seats to the Democrat side, and it didn't. It's actually trending negative, which... it is a very interesting situation that nobody predicted. The media also looks like idiots. The polling people definitely look like idiots. Saw Frank Luntz on television today, and even he is saying that he thinks his industry is basically over. They have no credibility now. They were wildly wrong. In their parlance, I mean, really, there's nothing, there is no there. Listening to them, having people put up poll information today clearly means absolutely nothing because they were wrong all over the place. And they clearly believed that there was going to be a Democrat blue wave, and everyone has agreed. No matter who wins this, no matter how it comes out now, clearly no blue wave, none whatsoever, barely a blue ripple. So far, as the numbers look, so far there is only one state that's flipped from Trump to the Democrat side. Only one. Arizona would be the only one. And honestly, Arizona is not surprising. Arizona, because of the fact that you have massive baby boomer population, and they're retiring from cities and moving to Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Florida. And Arizona and New Mexico were most susceptible to it. New Mexico is already fairly liberal, but Arizona, their population wasn't that big, so you move in millions of people from the outside who come there and vote, and they largely are doing that from cities. That is just really not very surprising. Florida is interesting because Florida is just a much more conservative place to begin with, and so the numbers have not been able to shift Florida very far. And Florida came out conservative again. Texas came out way more conservative than they thinking was going to happen. But be prepared. Texas is becoming one of those places that's massively divided between their big cities and the rest of the place. Anybody who thinks that this world is becoming all blue Democrat needs to look at the county map, the nationwide county map of red versus blue. And it is a very, very red map. It is primarily the politics of big cities. That's what it comes down to, is the Democrats live in big cities and Republicans live everywhere. That's really what it comes down to. So we will see. I think it's going to be at least several more days before we know. We might know. I think it's fairly likely that if Biden wins, we're going to know before if Trump wins. If Biden wins, it's going to be because Wisconsin and Michigan and Nevada's a weird one, by the way. I'm looking at Nevada to try to figure out why Nevada's just an odd duck to me. Why they are on that verge of becoming a blue state. I just don't know Nevada well enough, but I think if Biden is close enough that he could make the route for Trump to get there impossible, and so that I think we could know that before the end of the weekend. If Trump's going to win right now, it looks like it's going to take one of a couple of things. It's either going to take whatever's going on in Arizona to change what's going on in Arizona. If that were to actually change, and remember that in 2016 that happened. There were decided states come off the board late in 2016, and votes that came in late flipped states, and that was the giant changer there. If that were to happen in Arizona, everything's up in the air. It all starts. We look at this whole thing again. I would look at this whole thing again. But as it sits right now, all of the pathways for Trump to win require him winning Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is going to take forever to decide. So if we're going to have a sooner resolution, it's going to be because enough of the states fall for Biden to end this thing. And it's still going to take a while. Don't get ahead of ourselves, because, for instance, Wisconsin is so close that they're going to do a complete recount in Wisconsin. And if you go back to the whole hanging Chad thing in Florida, recounts change the numbers more than people think. It's a little bit shocking how much. And so when you're talking, if Wisconsin is within 20,000 votes, it can move that far, especially because during all of the recounting, they start looking at all sorts of things like ballots that were rejected and ballots that were accepted that maybe should be rejected and things like that. And those can change the numbers by quite a bit. I think anything within, if you're going to do recounts, if you're within 20,000 votes in a state the size of Wisconsin, that's still potentially in play. So we will see. But again, let's go back to my main point. My main point is life has gone on. The day is still very much like it was yesterday. Unfortunately, a little more like yesterday than maybe we want, but life is just going to go on, and we're just going to wait at this point. So try to cheer up. Try to look at it that the sun is going to come up again tomorrow, and life is going to go on. And we are really in a pretty good place because we're going to have divided government no matter what. And that is a positive for liberty.